here we are in Blender. This is the 3D tool that I'm going to be using to test the FBX file. So let's load it. File, import, and FBX. I'm going to navigate to the folder with the scars in, and that's in my recent folders here, so I'm just going to click on that. Here's our FBX file, it's the only one in there, so that's just showing up. And import, and here we are. Okay, well, it doesn't look like a lot's happened, but in actual fact, if we come over here to the outline, you can see that we have indeed got a file that's loaded. And when I click on it, we can see there's a little kind of dot down there. Let's turn on a gizmo. So this is the origin down here. Let's zoom in a bit. Control scroll wheel on the, scroll on the mouse in Blender. Looks like we have our scar floating up there. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move this so it's at the world origin. You can see the origin's down here, and it's obviously been built up in the air, probably because of the height of a human figure, maybe, I don't know. But for the purposes of what we want to do in Fusion, we need it centered around the universe, otherwise rotating it and doing things with it is going to be difficult. So to do that, let's do a couple of things. The first thing is I'm just going to go to the object, set origin, and this is going to move the origin to the center of the geometry. So now our origin is snapped up here. And if I bring up the numeric panel on the right, we can see here is our current location. This is where it is in space. It has a 90-degree rotation and a 0.01 scale. Let's move it back to the world center. Now I can do that here by just dragging and putting 0 on all of these, and it'll go back to the world center down here. But I can also do that using a shortcut. Alt and G will snap it to the center of the universe. Now we can hold down Shift, middle mouse button just to scale it, to pan it, and there we are. So there we are. We have a scar. It's centered, but it's, as you can see, it's kind of diagonal to our world. The red lines here is the x-axis of our universe, and what I want to do is I want to have this so that it's across the x-axis. So what I'm going to do is look down from above, so we can do that with this little gizmo here. This gizmo lets you navigate. I'm just going to click on the Z, which means we're now looking at an orthographic view right down from on top, and you can see that the item is kind of rotated kind of diagonally. So I'm going to rotate it, so let's go get the rotate gizmo, and I am going to just rotate it around till it looks good. I'm just going to eyeball it. I just want it to sort of line up like that, say. So now that's pretty good. So that's now when it disappears like this is what's called a clipping plane. You can see it flick off. This is typical 3D computer graphics, so I'm just going to adjust my clipping plane. It'll be the near one that's causing the problem, I suspect. I'll do the far one as well. There we go. Right, and as you can see, it's now lined across the x-axis. There's the red X, and we've kind of a much better kind of alignment for this. Right, so there we are. We have our FBX file. The only thing I'd note is it's quite small. What are the dimensions? I can tell you what the dimension of an item is simply by looking over here. You can see it's 0.0569 meters, so it's a relatively small item. That's probably like real world coordinates or real world size. However, we have to be a bit careful when we go into Fusion, because Fusion has its own grid size. 3D apps have different scales. You know, things like Maya, Max, Blender, Fusion all work at different scales. You have to know the relationship so that when you import things, they work properly. Now that we've done this, what we're going to do is I'm just going to select mode, click off that. Let's get this exported just so we can have a, well, we're not going to export it because we know there's a problem with it, and the question is, what is the problem? I happen to know the problem because I've run into this before with Fusion. And the best way to see it is if we can see this in wireframe, as we call it. So I'm going to turn on a wireframe overlay so that we can see that. So I'm going to come down here and open up viewport display, and I'm going to select wireframe, which you can now see, and I'm also going to select a thing called all edges, which will show every single wireframe edge. And there we are, you can see all of the polygons that make up our surface. And the surface is made up of what we call quads, and mostly this would work fine, but FBX is a bit touchy and sometimes it prefers triangulated meshes, and this is not a triangulated mesh, this is a quad mesh. And the best thing to do to fix it for Fusion is to triangulate it. Now other systems don't seem to have a problem. For example, I've used Alembic before in Fusion, and that doesn't have an issue importing Alembic files, but FBX can sometimes not import because of this issue. So to turn this into triangles, I'm just simply going to add a thing called a modifier. So I've got the object selected in our outliner. I'm going to come down here to the modifiers, and I'm going to add the triangulate modifier. And as you see, as soon as I do that, we now have lots of triangles, and this should now make Fusion happy. What I'm going to do now is make sure it's selected, and I'm going to come up to the file menu. I'm going to export it again as an FBX file. So export FBX, go to the same folder. I'm not going to overwrite it because obviously we'll need to keep the master file, so I'm going to call this SCAR 3D. Before I save it, I need to make sure there's some settings set down here in the preferences for the FBX file format, because if you look carefully, if I just bring it up so you can see more of it, at the moment it'll export everything in the scene, so it'll export cameras, lights, the whole shebang, and that's because FBX is designed to do that. Well, we just want the mesh, we don't want anything else, so I'm going to say selected object only. So that means that only the object that I have selected, which is the one I had in the viewport highlighted in blue, means it's selected, and I want to make sure that only the mesh goes out. And the last thing I want to do is make sure that the modifier is applied on the way out. So if we go to geometries, you'll see this tick saying apply modifiers. So that modifier that does the triangulation will get applied to the mesh as it gets saved, which means instead of a quad mesh, the FBX file will be storing a triangulated mesh. So with that done, let's hit export. And now we can jump back to Fusion and see what Fusion makes of this. So here we are back in Fusion, and now let's see if we can import it again. So again, Control spacebar and type FBX. There's our mesh importer. Again, shortcut to our SCAR folder, and here is our file that we just generated, SCAR 3D. And I'm going to open it, and now we don't get any error or complaint, and that's because we've fixed it with that error. So let's have a look at it. I'm just going to drag it into this view and do F, click on it and do F to fit, and here we have our FBX mesh. You see it here. Now it's looking quite large. I'm just going to check it. What we need to do is check it in relation to a normal FBX object, just to see how big it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this selected, Control spacebar, I'm going to add a merge 3D node, so merge 3D. I'm going to copy that, click off and V and paste, so we've got two of them. So this first solution I'm going to put into this window. So that doesn't look like anything's happened, but we're actually now looking at the output of the merge 3D node. So this is what that is showing us. And this merge 3D node I'm going to put a different object into and put it into this viewer. So up here, let's go and get our shape 3D, which is just as default, it will be a plane. So that's what it defaults to, and I'm going to put that into this one. And here we are. So what we can see here is that the grid looks very different in size to to this grid over here. So we can actually just merge them together. So if I put this one into this as well, you'll see, or hopefully we'll see if I move it out of the way, you can see there how the size differential is. So I want to make this easier to work with. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do F4 to go full screen, which is handy in any of the viewports. Alt middle mouse button to rotate around. And yeah, that looks pretty good to me. I think I will buy that. So F4 to return the view to normal. And now we can look at getting this textured properly and lighting it.